Human rights is the basic right to follow the religion you like to. You can vote. It's like a democratic principle. So you have the right to choose your education, your career, your religion, who you follow politically.
Okay.
So it's like a bit like democracy. So the Philippines is a predominantly Catholic country, but then I guess people there have a choice where they can go to school, whether it's a public school or private school. They have the right to vote. They have the right to do most things as possible. So, and then there's a respect for other religions, respect for male, female, things like that. At the moment, the president Duterte is not known for human rights because he is trying to solve crime, the drug problem. But by doing so, he says that the police can take action against suspected criminals. So, in terms of human rights, they don't go to court, and the suspected drug people can be terminated. So sometimes what happens is that because there's no court process, the human right is not respected. So in this example, because there's a chance that the human rights can be abused, because if somebody doesn't like another group, they can say, "Oh yeah, I took action and I killed him because of he's a drug dealer," but there's no way to actually determine because that action has been done. I think with every process, although in terms of the criminal aspect, you need to follow the process of law. So I think that should be done. But with any problem in human society, you probably need to, educate the people on what's right and wrong, so that we don't have this problem in society. You can never get everybody to agree with one idea, but if you follow the democratic process, then at least that is the guiding principle. I'm not here to convince people to agree with me, but it's just, people are born equal, so we should give them equal rights.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, so we're going straight into it.
Okay.
What is human rights? Well, human right is basically a person's basic rights to living, isn't it, as a person? To your right to life, your right to not get tortured, your freedom from slavery, your freedom to eat, to breathe in this world, to get education. It's all that is basically human rights. But it also touches part of civil and political rights when you talk about human rights. So if you're a citizen of a country or a citizen of a state, you also want rights that you get from the person of authority. For example, I want freedom of speech, but your government says I have to limit your speech. But that's your right to talk, right? I want education, but what if your government says no education for you? That's a limit as well. But it's your right, it's your human rights. Well, okay, so the question is quite broad when you talk about what is human right in my country. Basically, you have the universal human rights, which we follow, of course, and universal human rights include right to equality, right to life, right to education, and all that. But also in Malaysia, in particular, there's so I think how to describe it is every country is a little bit different. So Malaysia, as you know, if you studied Asian law, the official religion is Islam. So the human rights is basically catered more towards also to your religion as well. So you have human right, for example, you can be anybody you want, but you don't have exactly gender equality.
Yeah.
Okay, so because that's catered towards the Islamic precepts, right? The Islamic principle. What else in Malaysia? You have right to. Okay. So the government. One of the biggest issues right now is there's an allegation of government corruption, right? So you have the right to free speech, but the government has said that you don't have the right to write bad things about the government. So there's a limitation of that rights in Malaysia right now. So it's under Sedition Act, it's under Press and Publication Act and stuff like that. So you have a broad human rights where you can have freedom of expression, but there is also a very heavy imposition on your freedom as well in Malaysia. Yeah, so that's the current, I can say the current take of it. Do they provide enough? I can say they can do better. Yeah. They can do much better than that. Oh, there's so many. So many. Okay, but I will touch, I think, the main three problems that I think, as a layman or as a citizen of that country, this is what I see. So there's a huge problem in, what do you call it? There's a heavy persecution against human rights activists right now, opposition leaders, government opposition leaders, journalists, because there is, what do you call that? There's an uprising against the current government right now. So what happens is that because the government wants to control the situation, there is a lot of new acts or new law that has been introduced to control the people or control the press, because the press gives out information, right? So, right, for example, the current Prime Minister introduced an act called the Sedition Act. Yeah. Or the previous Prime Minister introduced something that's called the Internal Securities Act, which is the ISA. So the ISA gives a lot of power to, for example, police or to police to arrest anyone for about 14 days without trial. So they can arrest anyone and they can ask questions or whatever not, and that person doesn't get proper treatment. So they don't get proper trial. So that was an ISA. And then the current Prime Minister said, okay, you know what? I will repeal this law and I will introduce something that's called the Harmony Act. So he promised that he will repeal it, but he didn't. As of now, he didn't repeal it because there's a huge uprising against the government. So not only didn't he fulfill his promise, but he also introduced a lot of acts that repress the press as well. For example, there's a thing called the PPPA, which is the Press Publication Act. He doesn't allow, for example, online news blog to talk about anything about the government. Yeah, so that's one. And then he also banned public to use yellow shirts, because yellow shirt signifies going against the government. And then he also introduced something that's called the Communications Act, where if you write anything about the government or anti-government, you can be arrested and persecuted upon evidence. So it's a lot of things which, not just laymen, so anybody who wants to talk against the government is not allowed. There's a lot of blockings, there's a lot of, yeah. Offhand. If I want to change human rights in my country, right? I would say you have to repeal the Sedition Act. You have to abolish it. Repeal or abolish it. Introduce the Harmony Act. You have to give power to the press. You have to repeal the PPPA to give power to the press to write anything they want. You have to give power to the people to also create, like, to assemble in peace, right? You also have to give power to the people to also say whatever they want to say. I think if a government or an authority that is given too much power without check and balance, without anyone saying maybe, hey, you need to take back a little bit of whatever you're doing, and you just might want to check on whatever that you're doing, right? So I'm saying that, okay, you can do this, but you have to also not do this, right? Yes. So someone needs to say it. And I think with the current regime or the current law that's in place, we're not allowed to do it. Or there's a lot of fear to do it. Yeah.